What's going on, folks? How's it going with you? Let's talk about the cell and the different parts of the cell. Um, First of all, cells cells are pretty cool. The thing about cells is we didn't really know about cells until very recently, and what I mean by very recently is like almost 300 years ago, which is not. Which we didn't know about cells because we couldn't see cells because the cells are so darn small. So it wasn't until this dude named Robert Hooke came around in 1663, and he looked through a very primitive microscope, and he looked at a piece of cork that was came from a cork oak tree, and he noticed little spaces, almost like it almost looks like a honeycomb, with the honeybees that they make. Anyway, he noticed this inside of the cork things, and so he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna call those cellula," which basically means small rooms. So, like a jail cell, which is like a room. So cellula would be tiny rooms. Like my office is a cellula. It's a very small room. Cool. And this is a picture of cork the cork oak tree that's, well, not the specific one he looked at, but that's what the cork oak tree that he looked at, that might be what he saw. Yeah, don't worry about it. All right. So we have a few other scientists. So started off with Robert Hooke. Other scientists began making better microscopes, and they began looking at different types of things besides just the cork plant, but they looked at like pond water and blood. And so there was one guy named Schleiden. He's a German scientist, and he looked at plant cells, and another guy named Theodor Schwann, and he looked at animal cells. And Schleiden and Schwann, these two dudes right here, Schleiden, Schwann, they both were scientists, and they looked at these different cells. And then there's a decade, or about 20 years later, there's this guy named Virchow, Rudolf Virchow. He's this dude right here. He was a German doctor, and he proposed that all cells come from pre-existing cells or cells that already exist. So it was a combination of all of these dudes, Hooke, Leeuwenhoek, actually I'm not sure what he did, and then Schleiden and Schwann and Virchow, and they came up with this idea of cellular theory, which basically states that all living things are made of one or more cells, and a cell is the smallest unit of life. All new cells come from pre-existing cells, which makes me kind of wonder. Like, where did the first cell come from if all of the other cells came from a pre-existing cell? I guess it's one of those chicken or eggs ones, Like, if no new cell can just spontaneously exist, and literally they're saying all cells come from pre-existing cells, then where did the first one come from? To be honest with you, it's not a question I can answer right now. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? When you get questions like that, you're like wondering, what are they talking about? All right. Anyway, I need to tell you a little bit about macromolecules. Macromolecules is basically, think of like a train track, and the train cars are connected together, and they're hooked together. They're kind of like okay, we don't have trains in Hawaii, but the bus, like the A bus, it's the big double bus that they have. The one that has two, it looks like it's two buses connected. Yeah, the macromolecules would be kind of like that rubbery thing that connects the middle of those two of a real long bus, like the A bus. And so a macromolecule is formed by joining many molecules, small molecules together. You have a monomer, which is a single unit, and these are all monomers. And then you have a polymer, and then which is many monomers that are bound together. So what is the main ingredient in water? I mean, not in water. I just gave you the answer. What is the main ingredient in a cell? The main ingredient in a cell is water. Water actually makes up 70% of a cell, which makes water pretty important to, to life and that kind of stuff. Well, why is it? What's so great about water? Well, water. So first of all, water allows movement within the cells, and um, it also helps insulate your body. Water is actually a very good insulator. It doesn't really change temperature very quickly. You know how like in the wintertime in the mainland, the top of the pond freezes, but actually the fish still survive underneath the water. They don't get frozen in the lake. Um, the water underneath is still liquid because the thing is the water is such a good insulator. Now, the structure of a water molecule is ideal for dissolving other substances, and substances must be in a liquid to move in and out of cells. So, like I told you, water allows movement. So, water is made up of H2O. It's made up of 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. You can kind of see it in this picture right here. Let me see if I can see the view. Let's see. I don't want to present full on. Compact controls. Okay, I want to go view. Show speaker notes? No. Yeah, I don't want to show speaker notes. I guess I'll present, but I don't want it to be full screen. I don't know how to present this thing any bigger. How do I get rid of these slides on the side over here? Yeah, it's alright, Michael. Turn it in and I'll still grade it. Oh, that's even worse. Definitely don't want that. Alright. Alright, anyway. Water molecules is made up of an oxygen and 2 hydrogens. The oxygen is a negative molecule, and then the hydrogens are positive molecules. And so here's what happens when you take salt and you dissolve it in water. It breaks the salt up into the salt is made up of sodium chloride, NaCl. And then so what happens when you put the salt in water, the salt and the sodium and the chlorine breaks apart. And then you notice here, look, the negative chlorine over here gets attracted by these positive hydrogens over here. You see how that kind of works? And then you also notice how like this positive positive sodium is kind of attracting these negative oxygens. So that's what happens when you dissolve salt in water. And you thought salt and water was, pretty simple stuff. Okay, so let me tell you more about the macromolecules. The macromolecules, yes, water is essential for life, but the macromolecules, what they do is they join things together. Like I said, they're the rubber thing that holds the thing together. You hear a lot of noise in the background. That's because Miss Sononini, the 8th grade science teacher, is running a class of her own. So I'm going to try to compete with that. Hopefully it's not too loud. All right. There are 4 types of macromolecules in the cell, and let's go through it. First are nucleic acids. Nucleic acids contained genetic information. They're really important. Every single kind of cell contains some kind of nucleic acid, and that's where DNA. Yeah, that's totally DNA. That's the deoxyribon or nucleic acid, DNA. Does that make sense? So that's the genetic material. That's like the I kind of think of those as like the blueprints and the brains of the cell, and it tells the cell what kind of cell it will be, and it will even controls the cell. So this nucleic acid is an important macromolecule. The other kind of macromolecule is a lipids. Lipids, what they do is they store energy, they're protective membranes, they're in charge of communication, and we'll talk about each of these things. Another one is proteins. Proteins also help with communication, they help with transport, they do the chemical breakdown of substances and their structural support. So proteins kind of make up another part of the cell, and then also the carbohydrates. And I'm sure you've heard of carbohydrates before in food, and so we'll talk about those each. Actually, we'll do it right now. Nucleic acids. Well, that's a type of macromolecule. It's one of four, so there's four different types: nucleic acid, lipids, proteins, and carbohydrates. A nucleic acid is a macromolecule that forms when you have long chains of molecules called nucleotides that join together. This is where you have the DNA, which is actually used to create RNA. Cool? So, nucleic acids are important in cells because they contain the genetic information. This information can pass from parents to offspring. DNA includes instruction for cell growth and cell process, and DNA is used to make RNA, and RNA is used to make the proteins, which we will talk about right now. Here's the proteins. Proteins are long chains of amino acids. We talked about RNA, and so RNA consists of the blueprints, as I said, that will help you give you instructions on how to create the proteins. Cells contain many proteins. See, I think that the thing is, when I was a kid, when I learned about cells, I learned pretty boring. I thought cells were always pretty boring. Like, I thought cells of kind of this bag of jelly with a nucleus in the middle, and that's it, right? But to be honest with you, there's so many pieces to them. There's just all of these different things that are happening. A cell can contain hundreds of proteins. And proteins, there's different kinds of proteins that do different kinds of things. Like, for example, the amylase, which is in saliva. And what happens is it helps break down the nutrients that are in your food. So you need the proteins inside of the saliva to break down the nutrients. Or keratin, which is a protein found in your hair, and if you were a bird, it's feathers or that kind of stuff. If we sometimes use feathers because my mom and Tutu always get mad at me. Wait, why do they yell at you for missing? Is it okay if we miss? Oh, I guess you can miss virtual class. I mean, if your mom's yelling at you, I'll record it. I promise. All right, so those are proteins. Let's talk about the lipids. Now, these are actually lipids right here. Lipids. So what can you tell me about lipids just by looking at what I have listed here? Oil and butter and more oil and shortening fat. Crisco shortening. No, not chocolate. This isn't like, we're not talking about junk food. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Michael. Anyway. Oh, Michael, can you hear me? Audio check. Oh, wait. Someone's on the phone. Sorry. All right. Michael, can you hear me? Oh. No, I wasn't talking directly to you. I'm not sure what you're talking about with your mom yelling at you. You can miss class if you need to. But anyway. let's move on. So we're talking about the lipids. These lipids, what they do is they don't dissolve in water, and that actually is really important because the lipids, what happens is the water they can or they can form. Wait, what are you talking about? Oh, no, okay, Michael. I was just responding to your question, where I said, "Hey, you asked if is it all right if I can miss class?" And I said, "Yeah, it's fine if you miss virtual class. I promise I'll record it for you." That's all I was saying. Yeah. No, I was responding to your question. I wasn't talking to you. Yeah, I mean, if you need to go, you need to go. Hey, all right. Anyway, lipids. They are another group of macromolecules, and what they do is they play a major role, like cell communication and that kind of stuff. What happens is they also provide protective barriers in the cells because they don't like water. You notice how oil and water don't mix. Also, shortening and butter and water don't mix. And because of that, they have, yeah, Michael, you can go. All right. Because of that, what happens is they have the ability to protect the cell from things coming in because the water doesn't allow the movement through the lipids. All right, what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates, here's a sugar molecule. That's what sugar is, okay? And then here's what sucrose is. So this is a glucose molecule, and that contains sugar. Here's a glucose molecule, and then here's a complex carbohydrate. Boom! It's a whole bunch of these things tied together, a long chain of sugar molecules tied together. And what these guys do is they store energy. So sugars are in starches that are starches. Sugars and starches are carbohydrates that store energy. Fruits contain sugars. Breads and pastas are mostly starch. So there are different kinds of carbohydrates. There's some inside of fruits and some inside of bread and that kind of stuff. And the energy in sugars and starches can be released quickly through a chemical reaction in the cells. And these things will help give us the energy we need to get through our day. Are we cool? So that's all of chapter 1. We're all done with that. I'll try to hit chapter 2. I'll go through it pretty quickly, and you guys can go and enjoy your Thanksgiving. How's that sound? All right. Let me just check real quick. All right, cool. So what's going on, everybody? Can everyone hear my voice? I'm just double checking here. Awesome. And can you see my computer screen? Can you see my computer screen? Yes or no? Good. Okay. Let's talk about the different kinds of cells. All right, here we go. I'm going to start here. I'm going to go backwards. So, like I said, back when I was a kid, I always thought that a cell has a cell membrane, which is basically, like a barrier. And that kind of defines the cell, right? On the outside, there's the cell, and on the inside, there's the DNA, right? And I always thought that cells, the DNA is surrounded or is all contained inside of like this. I guess it's kind of like when I think of the movie Inside Out. Like the headquarters that the emotions are in is like the nucleus, and the emotions themselves are like the DNA. So I don't know. My kids have been watching this a lot, but one thing I realized is there's actually cells. When scientists looked at this thing, they noticed that there's cells that don't have a protective barrier that make up this nucleus. So then they were able to differentiate them into two different types of cells. We can classify these two different types of cells. One cell is called prokaryotic. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. It's prokaryotic and eukaryotic. cells. So prokaryotic cells have no nucleus. They have DNA, guaranteed. They have ribosomes, they have cell membranes, all cells have that. But eukaryotic cells have a nucleus, prokaryotic cells have no nucleus. That's something that I thought was interesting. And these prokaryotic cells, the ones that don't have nucleuses, they tend to be more simple. In fact, they tend to be the cells that make up certain types of bacteria and archaebacteria. And I know that I've covered those classes of living things back in chapter 1. So bacteria and archaebacteria, they both are made up of these prokaryotic cells. And they're kind of boring, so I'm going to spend most of my time today talking about the eukaryotic cells, which is talking about the plants and the animal cells. Those things are very interesting. We cool? All right. So let's talk about the cell shapes. So the cell shapes relates to the different functions that these cells have. For example, you have skin cells, which kind of look like skin cells are flat, and an egg cells is a big sphere. You have these plant cells, which you can see they kind of look like PVC pipes. They look like pipes to me. They're kind of rectangular and like hollow in the middle. And then you have these nerve cells, which kind of look like, what do nerve cells look? I don't know. They kind of look like when you have glue in between your fingers and you're pulling your fingers apart, and then you can see the glue stretch out like that. And what's nice about these nerve cells is they can project these signals over long distances. So long distance, they can send out signals and information, which is good for a nerve cell, right? Like, for example, why is a blood cell circular? What is the advantage of that? Well, they're small and circular, so they don't have any sharp corners, so they can get in and out of blood vessels really easy. They can pass through all these places, and they won't get stuck anywhere. You don't have any sharp corners for it to get stuck on. It just kind of slips and slides all everywhere it needs to be. All right, let's talk about the plant cell. Oh, and I said the plant cell, and this is not a plant cell, is it? No, it's not. Let's see. Oh, oops. Okay, here we go. Sorry. I think this figure is supposed to be here. There, that's the plant cell. All right. This is not a plant cell. This is the animal cell. Animal cell. Okay. So let's talk about the plant cell. What's interesting about the plant cell is here's the different parts of a plant cell. And I want you to notice a few things. The plant cells, I want you to notice the cell wall, which the cell wall is only in certain cells. Like here, well, I guess maybe I should start here. Let's see. See this orangey looking stuff around the outside? That's the cell membrane. Okay? Now notice the plant cell also has a cell membrane. See? It's the orangey looking stuff. The cell membrane is a flexible protective covering inside of the cell that protects it from the environment and outside of the cell. So it kind of is like the walls of the house that protect it from the outside environment. But notice this, the plant cell has an additional stiff outside member. It's got reinforcement on the cell wall, and it's it's got a cell wall, not just a cell membrane, which both plants and animal cells have. This one has a cell wall, which is a stiff structure that kind of gives that cell the rigidness that it needs to to perform certain things. We cool with that? So I kind of want you guys to look in your books or in these two pictures and notice the difference, the similarities and the differences that each of these cells have. Is this why plants are kind of crunchy? No, but what happens is, like, you need to have water going through these tubes of plant cells and that kind of stuff. You need to have, they need to transport these things. And so you need to have some structure so it doesn't basically collapse. I guess it's like trying to push water through a pipe or push water through a sweater. Like the sleeve of a jacket or something like that. The sleeve of a jacket wouldn't work very well, but the pipe would work very well because it's a very solid structure. Okay. Your appendages that you have is like your arms and legs. Those are appendages. Well, cells themselves actually have appendages as well. It's kind of creepy. Flagella, which is a long tail-like appendage, what those do is they whip back and forth and they can kind of help the cell swim and move the cell. And then the cilia, which is their hair-like structures that help a cell move molecules away from a cell. So they're small little, let's see. Let me see if I can look up a picture real quick. Lung cell, CILIA. Cilia. Here we go. See, these are actually cells on your, here we go. These are cells on your lungs, and these have little hair-like things. I mean, it's kind of gross, but it's what it does is it helps kind of push it moves the fluids, and it also, keeps out foreign materials, because obviously you don't want that stuff in your lungs. Yeah, they kind of look like coral, yeah? All right, cytoplasm and cytoskeleton. So, what is in the cytoplasm? Now, let me see if I can go back to the picture of this one. The cytoskeleton is here. Where's the cytoplasm on this picture? Let's see. There's the chloroplast. Okay. Okay, wait. Cytoplasm is where, so I told you that water is the main ingredient inside of a cell. Well, the water is contained mostly inside of the cytoplasm, which is a fluid inside of the cell that contains salts and other molecules, but it also contains a lot of the water. The cytoskeleton is like these little, think of these as like highways or freeways or roads that they're thread-like proteins that is kind of helps the cell move things along. And it's a network of cells that where the proteins are joined together. Is that cool? Does that make sense to you? All right, so we talked about the prokaryotic cells and the eukaryotic cells. And the prokaryotic cells is found in mostly, bacteria and archaebacteria, and the eukaryotic cells are much more interesting, complex, crazy ones. And those ones have a lot of different things that have specialized functions, and we call those organelles. It's it spells like organelles, but it's organelles, and they have specialized functions. And what they do is they surround the membrane, and they have different functions that they perform. So let me talk to you now about the eukaryotic cells and the organelles that are inside of the eukaryotic cells. I hope I'm not throwing across too much vocabulary. Is this complicated for you, or does this making sense? Wait, is it sort of complicated, or is it sort of make sense, or is it both? I think that I think the best thing for you to do is probably to listen to me talk about it, and then go back and read the textbook for yourself. And if you're confused, reread it. And that's kind of why I switched over to just me talking about something and gave you a textbook that we're using as well. So you notice the different style of classes where now what we're doing is we're going straight from this textbook. We're on chapter 2, and we're talking about the cells. And I think that that's provides another resource that might make it easier for you. So, what is a part, or what are some organelles inside of the eukaryotic cell? Well, an organelle that is in the eukaryotic cell that's not in the prokaryotic cell is the nucleus. The nucleus is a part of the eukaryotic cell that directs the cell activities and contains the genetic information stored in DNA. It's really important. It's the largest organelle that is inside of most eukaryotic cells. So apparently it's not in all of them, but it's in most of them. And what they do is they contain a DNA, the DNA that's inside. Yeah, it's kind of like the brain of the cell, or the control room. DNA is organized into structures called chromosomes, and chromosomes in the nucleus there's a different number of chromosomes for different species. For example, the kangaroo only has 6 chromosomes, whereas humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. All right, let's talk about this one. What is this? So let's talk about some other molecules or organelles that are inside of the cell. So proteins, which we talked about, are important inside the cell. A protein is made up of a small structures called ribosomes. So inside of that cell that I showed you, see this is the cell, and see these things over here? They kind of look like, I don't know, thumbprints to me. Yeah? Anyway, those things those are the ribosomes inside the cell, and a ribosome is not surrounded by the membrane. A ribosome is in the cell's cytoplasm, so it's in that fluid thing that we're talking about. And what they're attached to a web-like organelle that's called endoplasmic reticulum. So the endoplasmic reticulum is like this webbing stuff that the ribosomes are attached to and they're connected to. So in short, I'm just going to call them the ER because I don't like saying endoplasmic reticulum. But the ER spreads from the nucleus throughout most of the cytoplasm, and then the ER with ribosomes on the surface is called rough ER. They kind of look like, let's see. Let me see if I can get a good picture of rough ER versus rough ER. Rough ER has kind of these spots all over it. And what that does, let's see. Rough ER is a site of protein that is the site of protein production. if if an endoplasmic reticulum does not have ribosomes in it, then it's called smooth ER. And so that's the same thing as, all right, so here's the rough ER. It's got the spots all over it. But the smooth ER doesn't have the spots on it. And what that does is it removes harmful substances from the cell. So I think what's interesting is if you were an alcoholic, which I'm sure that none of you are, and I hope that none of you are, but if you drink alcohol, the smooth ER kind of ends up growing to help remove those harmful substances. But the problem is, if you have, what happens is your cells will actually have too much smooth ER if you drink, you drink a lot. And then if your cells have too much smooth ER, then the next time you go drink, you'll have to drink even more to overcome the smooth ER, and then the smooth ER is going to grow some more. And so the next time you drink, you have to drink even more. So then these people just start drinking a little bit, and then they end up having to drink a lot after a while, to have the same effect, because the smooth ER is doing its job, and that's not a good thing. That's actually a really bad thing. And Mr. Balde, I never drink, right? So I don't drink at all. I can count on one hand how many, things of alcohol I've had since I turned 21, and my smooth ER, I guess, is very, very small, because I don't have the need to create a lot of it, because it's not something that I don't know. It's not something that I'm really into. So that's the difference between the endoplasmic reticulum. All right. Energy. All living things require energy to survive. So here's the. Oh wait, no, this is a picture of energy. And what helps the energy to survive is an organelle called mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria of there's many of them. Like, for example, the human heart can contain thousands of mitochondria, and the mitochondria is surrounded by two membranes. Energy is released released during a chemical reaction, and this occurs inside of the mitochondria. This is actually stored inside of a molecule called adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate, also known as ATP. And this is a type of energy, or a molecule that holds a lot of the energy that you can use. All right, and that would be inside of the mitochondria that's inside of the cell. Now, let's talk about plant cells, and then I'll be done, because then that kind of rounds up when my class should finish, and I think that you guys will be happy about that, right? So I didn't go too long today, but I think that, we covered some interesting stuff. Anyway, the plant cells. Plant cells have certain kind of organelles that are really helpful, and one of them is called the chloroplast. So if we go back to our plant cell that was up here, should have your chloroplast. There we go. It's these green, they almost look like edamame to me. Yeah? And that's what helps the plant make photosynthesis. It actually turns light energy, and it makes its own food, and it turns it into sugar called glucose, and it uses water and carbon dioxide in the process, and it's known as photosynthesis. So that is something that the plant cells has that they can use, and they have that because they use chloroplast. And yeah, I guess it looks kind of like a pickle. It looks to me like a soybean or edamame. So those are the chloroplasts. All right, and then the last one is near the endoplasmic reticulum, the ER. there's an organelle that looks like a stack of pancakes. Let me show it to you right here. It's in the plant cell. Here's the endoplasmic reticulum. It's this guy right here. Okay. It's these guys right here, but right near it looks like a stack of pancakes. No, it's not the purple thing. The purple thing is the nucleus. The thing that looks like a thumbprint around it, the red things, that is the that's the ER, that's the rough endoplasmic reticulum. But right near that, it kind of looks like, I don't know, like a stack of pancakes or something like that. Anyway, that's the Golgi. That's the Golgi apparatus. And what it does is it prepares the protein for specific jobs. And then it takes these tiny packages of proteins and membranes and ball-like structures. It packages the tiny proteins into membranes and ball-like structures called viscioles. So it takes the proteins and it packages them into viscioles, which looks like this right here. So a picture of that is actually, here's the Golgi apparatus in an actual cell, in an actual plant cell. And then here's the chloroplast that is actually inside of a plant cell. So you can see parts of these cells. So I guarantee you that that first dude that we talked about, Robert Hooke, he couldn't see these cells at all. Or he could see the cells itself, but he couldn't see these organelles that we were talking about. However, if he had an atomic force microscope, if he had an atomic force microscope, he would be able to see these. And nowadays we can see these. We can use this thing called an atomic force microscope. Cool? Yeah, they didn't have electron microscopes or atomic force microscope or that kind of stuff. But atomic force microscope is actually pretty simple to understand. First, what happens is you have a sample that's like, you put something here, okay? And then you run this, what happens is this thing gets scraped along the surface of that sample. And when that thing gets scraped along the surface of the sample, it kind of shakes and vibrates and that kind of stuff. And then what you can do is you can have a laser that is that is shooting at this thing and then going onto some kind of like, think of this as like an eyeball, a detector of some sort. And what you can do is if you set it up correctly, you can have the laser will move, the point where the laser is will move depending on the angle that this thing shakes at. So this thing will shake. And the reason why they have a laser is because, like a laser shakes a lot, even if this thing only shakes a little bit. You know what I mean? And then from how much that laser shakes, and we can actually read that and interpret that, and then do some math, we can actually see that sample at a really, really small, really, really small things. And so, or a really, really small scale. And so then you can see the chloroplast and also the Golgi apparatus. I wonder if I can give you a good scale idea of how big this stuff is. Let me see if scale of the universe. There's this app I really like using, Scale of the Universe, and I think it's pretty cool. Let me see if I can get down to looking at it. Webpage not available. Okay, well, I guess I'll show it to you later. Anyway, I'm done with the class. I hope you had fun. I hope this was interesting to you. I hope it made sense to you. And have a wonderful, safe Thanksgiving weekend. I will not see you until Monday. We'll have our next class. Sound good? All right, talk to you later. Okay, bye.